is Carmen here with Mako, and today we are going to review our glaze profile for our stoneware glaze root beer. Root beer is a transparent, warm brown glaze. It breaks great over texture and works awesome in combination. Here we can take a look at it on the label. So here we have our root beer results fired to cone 6 on a white stoneware clay body. Our label states that this can be fired from cone 5 up to cone 10. We do expect variation in results with this range, which we are going to showcase here in our glaze profile. On the side here, we have our AP seal, dinnerware safe, notation, and the lot number, which you'll want to report if you do have any issues that you want to discuss with our technical team. Here we have different firing results, application instructions, and suggestions and tips. So definitely check out the label to find more information about best practices with this glaze. A lot of the icon information can also be found on our website, so definitely check out our website for the most up-to-date information here. And to start, I'd like to go ahead and do an application demo, as we always do with our glaze profiles. And this just hopefully gives you an idea of best practices when applying a coat of glaze, as well as gives you an idea of what the glaze itself looks like. So here we're going to be using one of our stand-up test tiles. On these ones we do 1, 2, and 3 coats, and then on the back a full 3 coats. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. I have my number 4 soft fan brush here, which is my favorite to use for applying stoneware glazes. We do make a larger size number 8 soft fan brush as well. So if you're applying on a larger surface, or you tend to be light-handed with your brush coats, the number 8 fan would be great for you. So we're going to apply this on here. We're fully loading our fan brush, swirling that around in the glaze to make sure that it's all the way loaded. And then when we apply our coat, we're just going to be spreading it on the surface so that it's not pulling or anything. And you get a nice even coverage. So we don't have big drips. And you don't have anything that's drying instantly. So you see our first coat, it is taking a second to dry. And that's how you know you have a nice heavy application on there. So I'm going to go ahead and set this aside while we review some of our test tiles here. So here we have the cone 6 version of root beer. So here I've got 1, 2, and 3 coats. As you can see, it kind of just like builds in richness as more coats are applied. There's not a huge color change with the different coats. It's more of a performance change that happens here, because this is a nice, vibrant, warm brown color. You can see it breaks great over texture. And at 3 coats, we do start to get a bit of a buildup at the bottom here. So with heavier application and in combinations, this glaze can produce mobility. And then on the back here, we've got 3 coats fired to cone 6. So again, this is completely transparent here. You could do design work underneath here. One thing to keep in mind if you're doing design work underneath the root beer glaze is that it can produce mobility with heavier applications. So even though you would be able to see the design underneath, you might get some sag depending on the product that you're using. If you want to avoid any sag or shadow underneath your lines, maybe applying 1 or 2 coats would be better suited for that. I personally really enjoy that kind of shadow that happens when you're doing line work and the glaze pulls it down a little bit. So it's all up to personal preference here. And then here we have our cone 5 versus cone 6 results, and there's not a huge difference in performance or color really. This does look a little bit lighter than this, but for the most part, they're gonna perform pretty similar. You still get a nice gloss finish. And then on the back here, looks pretty close to the same thing here. One thing that I would like to point out is that in these areas where the root beer is pooling, I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell on the video, but there is a little bit of like a haze, I guess you could call it, like a bluish, purplish haze. So on different clay bodies or with really thick application, this glaze can produce a bit of a haze going on it there as well. So just keep that in mind. It is a transparent glaze, and actually the number of this groups it in with our ice glazes, but this one as well as amber topaz, those do vary a little bit in performance because they have that little bit of sag, a little bit of mobility. And actually root beer, amber topaz, northern woods, and sapphire are all grouped in a glaze performance grouping together known as the dynamic translucent glazes that can be found in our comprehensive stoneware guide on our website. It's a really helpful tool to use for understanding performances of all of our glazes, as well as these ones here that we do have grouped together. So we'll go ahead and add our second coat onto our tile here. This is nice and dry. So I've got my brush here, again, fully loaded. Like I have it almost dripping. Well, it is dripping. And then I'm spreading that on the surface. Oh man, and I did a full coat here instead of my 1, 2, 3 coats that I usually do. So we're just gonna do 3 coats on the whole thing. I guess I could do my 1, 2, 3 on the back. So we're gonna reverse this tile since I was not paying attention. So again, I'm just laying that glaze on. I don't want my brush pulling on the surface, but I'm not trying to produce large drips or anything like that. So here's a nice smooth application and another smooth application. And these dynamic translucent glazes are really nice because since they do have a little bit of mobility to them, they're not going to be as rigorous for showcasing your brush strokes as, say, some of the stiffer glazes in our ice line. So they're a little bit more forgiving if you're a little bit more crazy or have a little bit more variation with your brush strokes, whereas some of our ice glazes or in general Celadon glazes are going to showcase the variation of your application a little bit more than, say, these ones in our dynamic translucent line would showcase. So here we have it at cone 10. So I really like this finish variation that happens at cone 10, and it does get a little bit darker, but we do have a decent amount of buildup at the bottom here, so you are going to have an increase in mobility when you're firing it to cone 10. So we get a little bit darker and a little bit more mobile, and then obviously this really nice finish variation that happens. So pretty cool. So next we'll go over our results with flux. So here we're showcasing light and dark flux underneath our root beer. So we've got light flux applied in about a 1-inch band, dark flux applied in about a 1-inch band, 2 coats of each, and then we applied 3 coats of root beer on top of that. The light flux brings this really, really nice creamy variation here, and the dark flux is really hard to tell just because the root beer is already so dark. And this was fired to cone 6, and on the back here we have the fluxes applied over root beer, and so here it's kind of less interaction and a lot of mobility was actually produced here too. We do have a nice glob built up at the bottom here. But here we have light and dark flux. It's like a perfect line that's happening there. All right, so here we have our cone 10 results with flux compared to the cone 6. So here we've got the same application. We've applied 3 coats of root beer to the tile, and then 2 coats of each flux on top of the tile. There's not much difference in their performance between the Cone 6 and Cone 10 color-wise, but as you can see, there's definitely more mobility in this Cone 10 reduction firing than there was with the Cone 6. All right, we'll check in on our tile here. Looks like we're nice and dry on our 2 coats. So we've got 1, 2, and then we'll go ahead and apply our 3rd coat here. And then we can review our alternative clay bodies and then some combination results. So again, just putting this on, making sure you're building that material up enough so that it melts and does what we want it to do. All right, so there's 3 coats on the front and the back. Nice even application. So then this will fire, if we fired it to Cone 6, it would turn out similar to this, except this tile's backwards. So that's for application. And then here we've got our different clay bodies. So when we're firing on different clay bodies, we typically recommend to fire with a 10-minute hold. And that is basically just to help any extra outgassing that might need to occur with these products. So here we've got root beer on a white speckled body, so it looks pretty good. Root beer on a speckled brown body, so this is where you can kind of see that haziness that happens on different clay bodies or with thick application. Hopefully you can see that there. You get kind of like this bluish purple tint to it. It's really cool. And then on this piece here, we've got it on a dark brown clay. It's really hard to see the color here since we're already on a dark brown clay, but the finish looks awesome. So we did fire this with a hold. We have seen instances where applying root beer to both the inside and outside of a piece can cause blistering. So if that's something that does happen in your process, we do recommend to either fire using a slow cool schedule, which will allow for the blisters to smooth out before the glaze hardens, or if you do have issues with that, maybe only apply it to the inside and only apply it to the outside, and that should also alleviate these issues. So that's just a little troubleshooting tip. We've gotten some questions about that over the years. It doesn't happen all of the time, but it has happened, and we just want to make sure you know how to fix it if it does. And so next we have our combinations here. So as you might expect, root beer can add a decent amount of mobility to combinations. As you saw on the Cone 6 tile, 3 coats of root beer does produce enough sag to have a buildup at the bottom of our tile here. So here we have 2 coats of root beer underneath 2 coats of pink opal. So you can see that mobility here where we're lighter at the top and it's pooling around the bottom. And then you get this nice warm pink modeling that happens with the pink opal. Here we've got root beer layered with green tea. So the root beer is a really dark color, so it is going to overtake most combinations, but I love this green tea that kind of pools out of here. You get some striations that happen as well as just some like microcrystals and modeling. And then we do see a nice little buildup of glaze at the bottom here. This was wiped back a bit because we expected some mobility. But generally we do 2 coats of root beer and then 2 coats of the combo glaze close to the bottom of this here. So any mobility is usually from the combination itself. And then here we have Celadon Bloom over root beer. So first we applied 2 coats of root beer and then 2 coats of Celadon Bloom on top. You can see how these crystals kind of affect the finish here, and then you get this nice bright variation from the turquoise color and the Celadon bloom. And again, we do have this sagging at the bottom. Celadon bloom is a really stable glaze, so all this mobility is going to be from the root beer in combination. All right, and I think that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you found this video informative and helpful in incorporating our glazes into your personal studio practice. As always, please leave questions or concerns in the comments. We love hearing from you guys, and make it Mako. Thanks so much, guys.